Hello, y'all. Greetings from Alabama. My name is Aaron. If you don't know, if you just happen to stumble on this video, my name is Aaron, and I run a website called Aaron's Audio Corner, as well as a YouTube channel, the one you're on right now, called Aaron's Audio Corner, where I review speakers objectively. So, welcome everybody, and I'm glad that you're able to join me. This is my second live stream, not total. This is my second live stream, and what I hope will be a consistent, I don't know, for lack of better words, maybe series of live streams. And what I want to do is try to do these every other week where I can come on maybe for like 30 minutes or an hour, maybe answer some questions. Because what has happened is I've noticed that I get a lot of questions in the comments and I just don't have time to answer them. I think you all know, and the majority of you know, that this isn't my day job. I actually have a day job. And so I do this in my free time. So that means that any kind of involved questions or emails and things like that that I receive, frankly, I just don't have time to go through them like I used to. You know, the channel's slowly growing, very, very, very slowly, but it's growing, and it's just kind of gotten to the point where, unfortunately, I'm not able to answer all the questions. So my hope is that if you can join me in the live stream, maybe you can ask your questions here, and I can get those answers. So we're going to go ahead and kick off right now. I want to give a shout out to Tim, not because he's saying really nice things about me, but Tim's a solid dude. He is our guy at the Daily Hi-Fi. And if you don't know, I am part of the Daily Hi-Fi. And that's a group of like-minded individuals, Joe and Tail and Chana Techno Dad. We just talk about home theater stuff and audio stuff, and then we just joke around and have a good time. It's live streamed every Monday at 6 p.m. Central. So if you're interested in checking that out, make sure you do that. And thank you again, Tim. Tim sent me a Light Bright box for Christmas last year, and I need to put it up, but I'm waiting until I move. Oh, and good news, I found me a place to move. So hopefully I'll be building a home and out of this rental place maybe next May or so. That'll be cool. I'm really excited about that. I'm looking forward to doing that. So I'll go through here and answer some of these questions. And you don't have to do super chats, but I'm not gonna lie, it's really appreciated. That just helps me, like buys me lunch. You know, I could lie and be like, oh, it makes blah blah blah. But no, dude, if you got $5 and you want to kick over super chat, I'm not gonna say no. Given the amount of equipment you have measured, why did you settle for Stereo Integrity HT18 V2 for your home theater setup? Have you ever measured them? Well, first of all, I don't have that home anymore. I moved out of that about a year ago, and like I said a minute ago, I'm in a rental home right now. Let me see here real fast before I answer this question. Okay, cool. The HT18, when I was building that home theater, I'm assuming you saw the video, and the majority of that entire home theater is DIY, from the JBL speakers that came from a theater that was in town to the subwoofers. I think the only thing that I didn't build, and I'm trying to really think about this, the electronics and the projector. I built my own little server rack where I had all the amps and everything positioned. The side surround speakers, I didn't build those. I built the baffle wall, I built a screen, built a lot of stuff, built the subwoofers and the enclosure. I chose those subwoofers because they were $150 each on sale at that time of the year when I bought them, which was around Christmas time, I believe. And they had a DIY sound group. I don't know if you all are familiar with that. And since I'm mentioning it, I want to just go ahead and pull it up. Now, it's been a while since I've been to DIY Sound Group, but that site is a wonderful place for those who are handy. If you have tools and you can build some speakers, you can order flat pack kicks, flat pack kits for subwoofers, for mains, for surrounds, all those kind of things. And so they had a 4 cubic foot enclosure that worked well with that particular subwoofer. 218s was all I needed. I didn't measure them. I could model them in Basebox Pro, and that's what I did. And I think I tuned the enclosure down to 18 hertz. It was ridiculous. And that's it. There wasn't really a whole lot of thought, a whole lot of consideration into measuring them. Again, because they were 218s. And I don't remember how large that room was, but it was ballpark. I'm going to say it was 24 by 17 feet with 8 foot knee wall ceilings. It was a decent sized dedicated space, but I didn't see the need to have any more output. I mean, it was plenty. Some of these guys that are using multiple 24s, I mean, I'm like, do you really need that much? But I guess there's no replacement for displacement. Anyway, I hope that answers your question. Let's see here. I'm thinking about buying multiple pairs of Kanto power speakers as a base layer. Thoughts? I've heard the Kanto speakers. I haven't measured them. I mentioned them recently in a review compared to the Vanuatu Transparent One Encore Plus. I had heard on the U6, I suppose that's how it's pronounced. And then I have seen the data. So I referenced the data in my video. But other than that one, I think I heard the Tux TUKs at a show. I just remember thinking like, well, these are all right. And that was kind of it. That's not to say they were bad. It's just when you go to an audio show, you're in a hotel room that's been made up to just accommodate speakers, not even necessarily sound good. And the idea really is just for manufacturers to show off in the flesh their product, not necessarily for you to get the ideal understanding of the sound signature of the speaker per se. Now, a good speaker will sound good in pretty much every room, but when you're sitting off center, when there's people talking in the background, you don't really get an opportunity to go to audio shows and truly demo a pair of speakers in the way that I would do if I were considering buying them. And that's kind of like a little bit of a side rant, if you will, very quickly. When I've gone to the audio shows, what I've noticed is there'll be multiple rows, multiple seats side to side, and people will be trying to listen. And there'll be a lot of people in the background talking and being kind of loud. And I get it, like you're excited, but maybe just walk outside and talk with your friends. The other thing, too, is that I'm really surprised at how many people genuinely don't know that you're supposed to listen to stereo speakers in the center. Now, you can sit off to the side, try to get an idea of the tonality and see if it shifts and all that stuff, but the imaging is going to just go by the wayside. That's just due to time delay and level matching, and asymmetric rooms, asymmetric sound response in different seats off the side. So sit in the center seat. If there's a center seat available, don't sit in the back right corner and close your eyes and try to judge a speaker. It doesn't work like that. Don't do that. Okay. Greetings from Canada, Joe the French Canadian. Greetings from Canada. In your perspective, which element is the most important for music reproduction at home to simulate a concert? Sources, DAC, amp, speaker, room acoustics, or even headphones? So headphones, to me, they can't put me in the venue. Headphones sound good tonally, but there's no space I mean, I've heard some really nice headphones, and I've yet to hear a headphone that can rival even a decent set of bookshelf speakers in terms of just putting you in the space. So headphones would be out for me. Speaker would be by far the most important thing. I mean, assuming that your DAC and your amp are doing what they're supposed to do, which is just reproduce the source media. If they've got things that are built into it where they're equalizing by default or they're altering the signal somehow, then that's something separate altogether. The speaker and then the room interaction with the speaker in relation to your sitting position, those are by far the most important thing. I got a lot of hello and what's ups. Only question I have is, how are you doing, dude? I am doing well, man. I'm actually kind of tired, but I'm doing well otherwise. I appreciate you asking. Have you discovered a speaker that measured well, but you subjectively did not care for it? I don't think so. I mean, it's possible, but I don't think so. There have been, well, no, let me take that back. There, I like speakers that have a bit wider radiation than, not the norm, but like plus or minus 60 degrees on average, horizontal radiation. And some speakers, especially ones with horn designs or waveguide designs where maybe the tweeter is set really deep into the waveguide, those are generally more narrow, maybe about plus or minus 40, maybe about plus or minus 30. They can measure extremely well, but they just aren't what I'm looking for in a speaker. Other people may like that and they may prefer a more narrow radiating speaker. That would probably be the only case where I would say that the statement that a speaker measures well, but I didn't necessarily care for it, would hold water. And that's just a preference thing. Oh, yeah. Oh God, I'm gonna mess this up. Gyong Fam. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I appreciate the super chat. Some people claim that tube amp is more efficient than solid state amp in generating sound. That's why tube amp needs less watts to drive speakers, provide dynamics. Your thoughts? I'll be honest with you. When it comes to electronics and amplifiers and things like that, I'm not really someone who feels comfortable telling people what to buy and how they work because that's just not my area. I wanted to get into it. I considered measuring and testing amplifiers and other electronics, but I just decided to stick with loudspeakers because to me that's more important. I'll see if I can kind of give you some sort of answer though, because you gave me a super chat. I got to give you something, right? Tube amp is more efficient than a solid state amp. So are tube amps more efficient? I didn't know that. I'm surprised if that's true. That's news to me. Again, I'm when it comes to amplifiers, you're looking at the wrong guy, and I'm the first one to admit that. But I'm surprised by that statement. I wasn't aware that they would be better. Now I do understand that tube amps, based on the measurements that I've seen, and then just anecdotally, they are generally higher in distortion and that they're lower in power. I've seen that. So my assumption then is that they're not necessarily more efficient than a solid state amp. So if somebody in the chat has some thoughts on that, I'll try to find it and I'll throw it up here for you all to see. Okay. 799 super chat from Nicholas. Man, I appreciate that. If you had a choice between dual JTR RS2 or dual 4000 ULF, what would it be for movie, music, room, best transients, dynamics, and output? All right. So I'll be honest with you. I'm familiar with the 4000 ULF, but I am not familiar with that particular JTR model. So I will Google both of them, look at them, and try to give you an educated guess based off of what I'm seeing here. And let's do this in real time. And I hope you guys appreciate, that that when I don't know something, I'm just honest with it. It's lying is never a good thing. It's easy to get caught lying. Captivator RS2 is a sealed subwoofer with two 18-inch drivers that equipped with 4,000 watt amplifier, digitally optimized. All right, so it's got DSP. That implies that the frequency response is going to be flattened out on the low end. I don't know if there would be compression built into this subwoofer. 21-inch, 18, new DSP, auto input, okay. Lower distortion, increased output, additional low end, sealed design for in-room, completely front firing, international, okay. There's not a lot. I wish Jeff had some measurements on his site. Oh, hold on. There's a database measurement. And while I'm pulling that up, oof, Captivator 4000 ULF, Captivator bass reflex with two 18-inch 4,000 watt amplifier. Is that not the same? Oh, okay. Two 18s, 4,000 watt, digitally optimized. Wow. Highest possible output with minimal distortions. Oh, that's ported then, right? Yeah, bass reflex. Okay, I see that now. Sound processors have been optimized, so it does have DSP as well. What are its specs? Plus or minus 3 decibels, 10.5 to 125. What does he got here? 16. Yeah, I mean, knowing JTR stuff, oh, yeah, I'm going to say the Captivator 4000 is probably going to be the way to go. But I would also spend my time digging to see if I could find data for both of those And let's see here. Frequency response. Seeing that here. Yeah, I'm not really seeing anything for objective data between those two, but my hunch is that the 4000 ULF, just because of he's got this spec right here, this 10.5 to 125, and it's ported already, which is going to typically boost the low end. Now it's going to fall off a little bit more rapidly at the tuning frequency or below the tuning frequency than the sealed enclosure would. But at 10.5 hertz, well, I don't even know what this thing is tuned to. That's pretty dang low. And then the other one's at 16. I mean, you're kind of splitting hairs there, but my gut, based on just what I'm seeing here, is that the ULF is probably the way to go. And I appreciate the super chat, by the way. See if there's any others ones here I missed. Okay. Now let me start back from the top. Hello from Charleston. Jason W, you should join. Man, you know what? No, I'm not kidding. I was really and truly thinking about what happened to that channel, wink, wink, a couple days ago. Oh, yeah. So drop me a line. I'd be curious to know what you're up to. Is a 75-watt receiver good enough for normal home theater setups? Debating if I should buy the Denon AVR S660H. Now, the S660H, I don't know if that one has the Odyssey Multi XT32. And that would be something that if I were going to buy a receiver, I would really want to make sure that I have XT32. But let me look and see on their website. I'll bring you guys with me. No. Features. Where do I say anything about Odyssey? Multi EQ and dynamic EQ. But I'm not seeing anything about. Yeah, so I want multi EQ 32 or XT 32. I'm not sure if they still make both of those now, but these to me just don't have enough equalization. To answer your question about power, it depends on the sensitivity of the speaker, and it depends on the distance that you're listening. And a site that I like to go to, and a lot of you may already know this, but if you don't, then this might be something that you'd be interested in. See if I can remember which one it is. That's not, definitely not. This is it. Okay. I use this one a whole lot. Get rid of some of these other. Okay. So what you do is you go in here and you say speaker sensitivity at 1 watt, 1 meter. We can say average sensitivity for a pair of bookshelf speakers, 85. Amplifier power, 70 watts. Distance, most rooms, about 9 feet. Most, not all, but most rooms. Number of speakers, we're just going to say, well, I don't know if I want to do 2. Yeah, we'll do 2. All right, we're going to do 2. Away from walls, no, we're going to click near a wall because it's in a room, and near a wall, 2 to 4 feet is pretty typical for most speakers. If you put them into a corner, then that adds a little bit more SPL, but I wouldn't recommend doing that. Then we hit calculate gain from amplifier, blah, 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 blah. 101 decibels SPL at the listening position. If you run this sucker full tilt, I would say that that's adequate if these make up your actual situation. Now, if you have severely low efficiency speakers, 81. That changes to 97. That's still adequate. 9 feet away. If you're at 12 feet away and you're at 85, and for the pair of speakers, you're at 98.5 decibels. That's still pretty dang loud. I would say that for most people, 75 watts is going to be adequate. Now, I always like to go a little bit crazy and throw in more power. The reason I like doing that is because I like at least the notion of having higher dynamic range. But is it necessary? Maybe not. I can tell you that on average, I'm listening about 10 feet away from my speakers when I do my reviews. And typically the output wattage, the wattage is between 40 to 50 watts, just kind of bouncing around. I'm watching the meters go. And that's at a a reasonably high level. I would say that's typically around maybe about 80 to 85 decibels at that distance. So I would say 75 watts would probably be adequate for what you need. And again, the only thing that I would maybe reconsider is just if you can afford it to step up to something that has multi XT or multi XT32. But if you're shopping in that particular region because you need to keep it to a reasonable budget, then I understand. Oh, okay. Love the channel, Aaron. Appreciate that. In your review of the Pioneer VM50, woo, that was a long time ago. You pointed out that most 5-inch active speakers have an issue with low frequencies. Could you please do a video giving more details on this? Okay. Mm. Probably, and I don't remember because it's probably been 3 years. But Aaron's audio corner compression. I think that I was probably talking about compression limiting, and nobody wants to see this. Okay, so if you go to, matter of fact, here, I'll just drop it in the chat. This link right there, click on that link, and what that will do is it will take you to a video where I talk specifically about compression limiting, which will answer your question. In a nutshell, most powered speakers use DSP in them, and they will use them for a number of reasons: to smooth out the frequency response, to boost up the low end at lower volume, to cut the low end at higher volume. And the latter is really what I'm talking about when I talk about compression limiting. And that is really just kind of a warranty type thing for the most part. If you've ever driven your car and you've turned your stock radio up really loud and it distorts, but you don't blow a speaker, it's probably because it's running some sort of compressor in there to limit the low frequency output. So it's going to start tailoring that low frequency. So maybe at mid volumes, let's say 70 decibels, 50 hertz is prominent, 30 hertz is prominent. At 80 decibels, 50 hertz is still pretty prominent, but 30 hertz, you don't know where it went. And they do that to keep the woofer from overexerting and ultimately frying the voice coil or jumping out of the gap even and freezing it up. Let's see here. Michael Ratner, $5 super chat, man. I appreciate that. Thank you very much, dude. Thinking of Revel F208 for my living room, when people rave about dynamicism of compression tweeters like JBL HDI for pure HT use, which is better? All right. With the F208, I'm going to pull it up. Love that speaker too, by the way. Yeah. 2.8s, what, a 1.5? Woo. I mean, I really love these speakers. I think these are like probably, I don't want to call them budget because at almost $2,000 each, they're not budget. But compared to some of the other Revel lines and some of the other manufacturers out there, these are kind of budget. 1-inch aluminum dome tweeter, 2.8s, 5.25. All right. So people rave about dynamicism of compression tweeters. The Revel and the JBLs generally have good distortion metrics at the crossover between the mid-woofer, mid-range, and the tweeter. Is it true that horn-loaded compression drivers have higher dynamic range? Not always, but it could be true. And the reason for that is because the tweeter is sunken into a waveguide. And when you do that, you basically boundary reinforce the lower frequency and you give that tweeter additional acoustic output without having to drive it harder at that frequency range. If you're familiar with corner loading, and if you're not, then let me just kind of give you a crash course on it. Imagine that you're talking in a room and then you walk into the corner. What's going to happen is that corner, the walls are going to reinforce your voice at particular frequencies, usually the ones where they're more omnidirectional and directional to some degree if you're facing into the wall. If you're facing away from the wall, then the higher frequencies aren't going to be reinforced. That is what you would call corner loading. Uh, Cabin gain for a subwoofer in a car is kind of the same principle as corner loading because the wavelengths are longer than the distance or the dimensions of the room, or in that case, the car. In the particular case of corner loading your mouth into the corner, you're getting all this extra reverberation on your lower frequency voice. That same principle, so to speak, applies to using a tweeter in a waveguide. Now, if you mount that tweeter flush on that baffle, let's say this tweeter measures perfectly flat from 1 kilohertz to 20 kilohertz, mounted flush on the baffle. It's nothing's going to change. But as you bring this thing down into basically a corner, the lower frequency around, I'm just making up numbers here, 1 to 3 to 4 kilohertz, it's going to start naturally boosting because there's more reflected energy being radiated off of that waveguide behind it and then pushed back out in the front. So that's really what corner loading is. That is where you get the extra dynamicism of a horn loaded tweeter. And it's basically free lunch. It's just free SPL. You might gain 6 decibels from just corner loading or horn loading that tweeter. What a good manufacturer. So that's another thing. Oftentimes you'll hear about people say that horn sounds shouty. There's reason for that because what used to happen is you would just take that tweeter, horn load it, or compression driver, you would horn load it, and you wouldn't fix that big peak between 1 to 3 or 4 kilohertz. You would just let it stay up and it would make it sound like this. And then you would just have like a really shouty kind of sound in that 1 to 4 kilohertz region before the sound was more directional and kind of flattened off. With a good design, which there's many of them now, thankfully, the manufacturer or the designer will go in and they'll take that little boost and they'll apply some sort of passive crossover or they'll apply some kind of active equalization to it and they'll level it back down. But you've still got that quote unquote headroom for that tweeter at that lower frequency, for frequencies of tweeters. Again, 1 to about 3 kilohertz on average is what I would consider low frequency for a tweeter, especially like a 1-inch dome tweeter. Compression drivers, it's kind of the same thing. They're just higher efficiency. So the power that is delivered to that driver isn't lost in other mechanical aspects. So anyway, I hope that answers it. I kind of feel like I rambled a little bit, but hopefully that makes sense. I have a pair of Hiko Aurora 300. It'd be cool to see how they measure. Any chance of reviewing them? Um, honestly, probably not. I did reach out to Audio Advice recently about measuring or sending me some speakers, and I asked them for some Sonus Faber Lumina 2s. They're on their way. They'll be here Thursday. How cool is that? So shout out to Audio Advice. I know that they sell the Hiko, but it's really just not something that I'm interested in right now. And I'm really trying to pay attention to things that I'm more interested in. I just got through measuring a bunch of Aperion audio speakers. And actually, I think that I might have some of the data up on my website already. Yeah, I'll bring that up real fast. Their center channel, their slim on-wall speakers, and then I've got their bookshelves that I'm working on getting the data uploaded to my website right now. And I'm just like, they're like, okay, I'm not even going to do a video on them because they're really just not that good. So I'm going to share the data and I'm going to move on to the next thing. And the Hiko is kind of like, they may be great, I don't know, but it just doesn't excite me. So I'm really trying to focus on things that I'm personally more curious about right now, just to give me something different to do for a little while. What else is in there? I think the MoFi Source Point 8s are on their way as of today. I've been told. So that'll be cool. I'm looking forward to reviewing those as well. Jane Tyre, Aaron, just want to say that I appreciate the effort and the capital that you put into this. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you watching, man. Or woman, Jane. Listen, that's not a diss. My name is spelled Erin. So if you are a guy, then okay. And if you are not, then apologies. I'm sure you can understand. From Victor Boyd, $5 super chat, man. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Was going to ask an amplification question, but you just covered it. Just wanted to say thanks. Okay. Well, I'm glad that I was able to answer it. Those Revels look nice too. Yes, they do. I really do like those Revels. I really wanted to order those F208s. I think it was the F206 like years ago, but it was just outside of my budget. Now I think if I were going to spend money on Revel speakers, I really do like the F226 BE. I mean, to me, those are the bomb diggity. I mean, some of you show some of you real fast. It's just really cool speakers, tons of dynamic range, lots of SPL capability. The only issue is that they just don't get low. You're going to have to buy a subwoofer. And when you're spending that much money each, you really want to go, what? I still have to have a subwoofer? They make up for it in sensitivity. I want to say it's maybe 89 decibels at 2.83 volts, 1 meter. So it's good in sensitivity, but you're still going to need a subwoofer. That's the only thing that bums me out about them. But otherwise, love those speakers. And as a cheap plug, if any of you guys and girls out there are planning on buying anything from Crutchfield, I have generic Crutchfield link in my description below. And if you just go to that link and click on it and then you buy whatever you want through Crutchfield, that helps me earn a small commission. Doesn't cost you anything, but that small commission goes toward helping me order new things. And like I said earlier, buy lunch, buy supper, just, try to make this something that benefits all of us in some manner is what I'm trying to do here. Okay. Okay. Here's one. Thank you for the $5 super chat, Vela Ruthvik. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Why do we need speakers with linear directivity? Shouldn't we be asking for somewhat narrow DI in the mids? Reflections are controlled, thus tonality. So linear directivity, you got to think about it like whatever you are pointing at you, you really want to have reflected back off the walls at you. And if that directivity shifts or changes somewhere in that band, then that means that there's the potential for audible differences in the reflections. And an easy example of something like that would be diffraction from a tweeter just being surface mounted, or edge diffraction from a tweeter on a cabinet. How big a deal is it? That's going to vary case by case. And I feel like you're probably asking something that's a little bit more pointed just because you mentioned narrow DI in the mids. But if you're talking narrow DI in the mids and then widening again in the higher frequency, then you're going to wind up with a dip in room and probably a bright sounding speaker, because if it's somewhat flat DI in the high frequency relative to a narrow mid DI, then in my experience, you're going to wind up with a speaker that just sounds too top end heavy, and it's going to be very fatiguing. Speakers such as the JBL 4367 with low compression crossover 750 hertz sounds amazing dynamic. How much of this is due to the compression driver playing down that extra octave? I'm not quite sure I follow here. And by the way, what's up, Paul? Paul is a patron. I appreciate that. Paul's been with me for a long time too. How much of this is due to the compression driver playing down that extra octave? Well, generally I would say that when you word it like playing down an extra being the key word, octave, that kind of implies that it's playing lower than it should. In the case of that particular speaker, that driver, 750 hertz was probably what it was designed for. I mean, if I recall correctly, that compression driver was designed to be part of that speaker, as opposed to maybe a manufacturer saying, I've got this drive unit from another model and I want to make it work with this new speaker that I want to design, so I don't have to retool anything or come up with a new design. I think in this case, that particular driver, that compression driver, was created for the 4367. And I know that the mid woofer, that 15-inch, because is it a 2216 ND-1? So it's a separate version. It's an updated version from the JBL M2. So I know that one is designed for the 4367. I'll be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure that I follow this question, but I would say that it's not so much the driver being playing down or that driver playing down an extra octave as much as it's a good driver to begin with, and it's sunken down in that waveguide pretty good. So there's a lot of SPL increase to it on its own natively, and then they just kind of flatten it out with their passive crossover. So you've got a bunch of free lunch, as I said earlier. A Purion Theatris would be cool to get your opinion. Maybe. We'll see. I just don't. The Purion stuff, I reviewed their The Novus was the newest one. What's their other one? Versa? I can't remember now. But I just, it's not really. I'm just not impressed with it, and I don't know if I want to spend time on another one of theirs. I feel bad saying it. I will tell you this: the folks at Alperion have been great, and Alperion was actually the first what I would consider hi-fi speaker that I ever owned. I bought them back in I think 2007, but it's just not something that I'm really that excited about right now. John Bradley Jackson, $10 super chat. Thank you, John. I appreciate that very much. I ordered an SVS Ultra Tower System Plus 4 elevation speakers, which I will pair with a Marantz Cinema 50 at 110 watts and 8 ohms. Will this be adequately powered? I would say so. The thing is, when you're powering all the speakers off of the AVR, you've got to consider that the power rating, if it's 110 ohm or if it's 110 watts, is that at 2-channel. So I can go and see real fast. But even if I hit myself, even if it drops down to a lower value, I think, unless it's considerably lower, you're still going to be okay. But let's see if they tell me what that rating is, because most of the time when they rate these, it'll be 110 watts at 8 ohm with 2 channels driven. And if you drive all the channels, then it's something different entirely. Detail view, power amplifier. Yeah, so they're saying 110 watts, 2 channels driven. They're not even giving me. I don't know what 70% guarantee is. Is that 70% of power you're guaranteed to get? Somebody like Gene would probably be somebody that would know about this particular thing, Gene from Audioholics, because he tests a lot of. I really like how he tests AVRs. He'll test them in 2-channel mode, but then he also tests them in all channels driven mode. I think maybe for every AVR that he reviews, at least when he can. I would still say that with those SVSs, the sensitivity on those is probably going to be upper 80s. And then the other speakers aren't going to need to get that much discrete information. So they may not necessarily need as much power, even if they're not high sensitivity or high-ish sensitivity. Yeah, they're saying 88 decibels, 2.83 volt, 1 meter full space. So yeah, that's reasonably high. I think with your power output, that'll be fine. Unless the only way that I would see it not being adequate is if you're like really far away. I would say if you're within 12 feet, probably more like 10 feet, you're going to have enough power. You're going to be more than fine. I wouldn't really worry about that. And if you want to upgrade to separates later, you can always do that. But I don't necessarily recommend anybody ever start with separates, especially if I don't know you personally. Like if you're a good friend of mine, I can come over to your house and we can talk about it and we can turn it up and you can say, that's not enough. Then I can say, okay. But generally, I would suggest finding a good AVR that has pre-outs. And then if you want to later on, you can add additional amplifiers externally. But thank you again for the super chat. I appreciate that. Horror fan, $6 super chat, man. I appreciate that. Please comment on my above 3-part question. Okay, let me go find your 3-part question. Horror fan. Where'd you go? Where'd you go? Where'd you go? You guys will have to bear with me. Looks like I'm about to scroll up for a little bit. Techno Dad! What's up, buddy? Your face is higher in distortion. Okay, horror fan. I found it. Okay. Hi, Aaron. So I bought the DBR62s, but they sound too thick at higher volumes. I had them 12 inches from the front wall to the back of the speaker. When I pulled out the speaker 30 inches, they sound great. By the way, the sidewalls are over 6 feet away. Well, that's pretty far. but I just can't have them out that far. Most I can give them between the front wall and the back of the speaker is 12 inches or so. Okay. I am going to return them. Do you think if I got those, excuse me, Sierra 1V2 or any speaker that has 5 1/4 woofer instead of a 6 1/5? So it's not so much about when you say thick, what I think of is mid range. And that may be wrong. You could be talking about mid bass. So if you can clarify for me, that will help me. But I will answer it on the assumption that maybe you're talking about mid range. And that would make sense that when you pull them out from the wall, maybe it gets rid of that. Those ELACs, let me go pull those up because if I can look at the estimated interim response, I can kind of maybe trigger my brain into what I heard. R62. Appreciate you all watching and kind of being patient as I go through these. It's tough. I wish I had somebody like an intern to queue these things up so I could answer them more easily. But so you're saying thick. Now, if you're saying thick in the mid range, then maybe this area right here, because there's a couple little resonances, might be it. If you're saying thick on the low end, then I can go and look at the Sierra, and I just reviewed that, so it's right here. Where's the estimated? New tab, new tab. And one thing I want to make sure I mention is this is relative. If you see a dip in the mid range, you may hear a dip in the mid range, or you may hear it as the speaker being bassy, because then relative to the mid range, the bottom end might be a little bit higher, or relative to the mid range dip, the top end may be a little bit higher. So I always try to caution people to understand that these things are relative. What I hear may be different from what you hear, or maybe I should say, we may hear the same thing, but the impression that it gives us about what is wrong or what we like may be different for different reasons. And let me throw myself back out of here for 1 second. For a good example I can give you is due to my car audio experience, aligning mid bass to subwoofer is extremely hard. And so that's usually one of the first things that I will pick up on is if it's not aligned correctly and in phase, then I notice it. Sibilance is also another thing that really grates on my nerves that stands out to me. Whereas somebody else may say there's no mid range. Like they may not say, "Oh, it sounds sibilant." They just say there's no mid range, but that's relative to the high frequency. So that's kind of an example I just wanted to throw out there. Now we'll go back to this. All right, so this is the acoustics or ascend, and this is the estimated interim response to the DBR. So my guess then maybe is you're talking about this area, because what I do see is a little bit of a mid bass lift compared to the mid range, and then the tweeter level kind of flattens out. And if I go to the Sierra, it's just smooth throughout. Therefore, to answer your question directly, I think so. I think the Sierra might be what you need if that mid bass bloom is what you're talking about, where you say it sounds thick. Hopefully that helps. And make sure you let me know, shoot me a message or something in that video review of the Ascend, and let me know. I'd be really curious to know what you think about that speaker compared to the ELAC. I missed a couple down here. Sorry, but I need to go answer those. Joe the French Canadian, $10 super chat. Thank you again, Joe. I really appreciate that. Any plans on measuring paradigm speakers? I don't really have plans. I would like to, and I have requested, but they're really hard to get. So if anybody watching this either has the hookup with Paradigm, or you have a set of Paradigm speakers that you're interested in me reviewing or testing out just out of curiosity, make sure you get in contact with me. You can find my email on my YouTube page. You can just shoot me an email that way. I have reached out to Paradigm directly. It was years ago, and I don't even recall what happened there. So the answer to your question is right now, no, but I would like to. And okay, keep going here. Um, Technology 4617, $5 super chat. Thank you. In cars, would eliminating acoustic interaction with the cabin with waveguide beamforming be a good approach if compensated by DSP spatialization? Sure. It depends on what you're trying to do, though. You could use phased array type stuff. You can use it anywhere, but it's number one. It's not easy to do. I mean, you've got to. So if you want a phase array, then you're going to have a lot of DSP channels, and you're going to have have a lot of individual drive units to do some kind of time delay compensation to offset and basically beam steer things. But are you wanting to do that just for the driver's seat only, or you want to do that for multiple seats? So I played around with stuff like that, and I'll be honest with you. At the end of the day, I've always come right back to doing just a standard stereo setup in a car without any VBAP vector-based array panning. I've done ambiophonics, ambiosonics. I played around with doing crosstalk, inter-oral crosstalk cancellation by putting speakers 2-inch Daytons right in my headrest using binaural mics. This was like 10 years ago, using binaural mics, measuring just the left side, measuring just the right side, and then basically doing the inverse. So for the right side speaker that hits the left ear, I take this left speaker behind me and I cancel that sound out. For the left speaker that hits the right ear, I take the right speaker behind me and I cancel that sound out. And I can tell you that it worked really well for the right speaker, but that's because there was more head shadowing from that right speaker. The angle on the right speaker was maybe 30 to 40 degrees. The angle on the left speaker on the driver's side, there's hardly any head shadowing. It's like maybe 15 degrees at best, and it's going right there. So my left ear is getting a lot of the sound, but so is my right ear. I'm not too far away from being dead on aligned. And head shadowing, for those of you who don't know, is just picture you're looking at a speaker dead on. Everything that speaker is sending out, both ears are going to hear equally. Now, if you take that speaker and you start moving it more and more to the side of you, and then ultimately directly off to the side, then that left ear is not going to hear nearly the same thing as that right ear. And in fact, the majority of the high frequency, if not practically all of it, is not going to be heard in that left ear, but it will be by the right ear. That's because your head is physically blocking the sound, and that's why we call it head shadowing. That's the head shadowing effect. So when we talk about stuff like this, it's waveguides and beamforming. You could, if you really want to have a very narrow directivity for a drive unit, a 6.5-inch beams somewhere in the ballpark of about 1500 hertz. A 15-inch woofer is going to beam somewhere in the ballpark of like maybe 400 hertz. I'm just kind of thinking these numbers off the top, but it's somewhere in that area. So if you really want in a car to get rid of reflections as much as you can, the cabin width usually is about equal to 300 hertz or so. So you need to be starting at 300 hertz, making that directivity super, super narrow. And the only way you can do that is by using a very, very large speaker. An 18 or a 20-inch midwoofer is going to start beaming at that frequency. And then you're trying to run at full range when it's not designed to be run full range. You're going to have all sorts of breakup modes on that woofer. I don't know any manufacturer that makes an 18-inch mid-range that is intended to be played more than maybe an octave above its beaming point. I mean, even Pro Audio, I can't think of anything that I've ever seen that would do that. So I think I probably understand what you're asking, but it's just, I don't really think that it's incredibly feasible for a standard person like me, at least, to pull off what you're talking about. Now, manufacturers, of these high-end systems, they have the smarts. They could build the DSPs and array a whole bunch of 2-inch full ranges in there, and they can pan it and do all the things they want to do. But me, I'm too dumb, and I don't have the time or the resources to even start to figure that out. But man, I really like that question. Okay. A $5 super chat from Ansul Deer. Would love to hear your thoughts on using KEF R7 Metas as LCR. MLP is 11 feet from the speakers, trying to decide between them and Revel 228 BE. All right. The Revel is going to have a bit of a wider dispersion pattern. I'm ballparking without having seen data. I'm thinking probably about plus or minus 60 degrees, maybe 70, but it's probably plus or minus 60. The KEF is probably going to be closer to about plus or minus 40, plus or minus 50. So that's one difference that stands out to me, even if the linearity is the same. The coherence and the concentric style nature of the KEF is certainly a pro. And honestly, man, if you said you have to choose right now between KEF and Revel, it'd be tough. I don't even know that I could make a choice because I would second guess it the entire time. The 228BE is going to need a subwoofer. The R7 Meta, I'm curious what they're are they sealed or ported, right? They are ported. Okay. 24.99 each. Yeah, they are ported. And what is their F3? Because I do trust KEF specs. 48 F3. So yeah, you're still going to need a subwoofer. I'm not really surprised at that. 5-inch aluminum cone. But you're talking about the 228BE. Now the Revel 228BE uses 2/8s, right? Look at this. I promise I'm not making this all come up in Crutchfield, but if you're out there and you think, God, I really want a pair of speakers and I'm going to have to order from Crutchfield again, just a reminder, my affiliate links or generic affiliate links, just click the Crutchfield one and go. It's appreciated. Yeah, it's got 2/8. So I would say that, you might, and this is just all me hazarding a guess based off of the drivers that I see in these speakers, that the Revel probably has a higher dynamic range. And I don't know that it necessarily gets lower, but it probably can take power and have higher dynamic range. They're saying their -6 is 27, but that I need an F3 to compare apples to apples. Fortunately, I don't have that. See, they're saying right here 27 to 44,000, -6 is 27. I don't know what their F3 is. That doesn't really help me unless I can compare apples to apples. Let me think about this. 11 feet from the speakers, trying to decide between them and Revel 228BE. Gosh, if you had the means to order them from a place that has a good return policy, I would do that. I would do that before because they're different enough in design that there may be something about one that you really like over the other. Let's say that the Revel is higher dynamic range. Well, the KEF is going to do better as far as vertical alignment just because it's a concentric, and KEF makes really good concentric drivers. So your window is probably going to be maybe plus or minus 40 or 50 degrees vertically, as opposed to the Revels. Again, I'm hazarding a guess here because I don't have data for it, but I would say maybe plus or minus 20. And if it's doing plus or minus 30, that's really dang good. I'd be surprised if it were doing more than plus or minus 20 degrees vertically. So that KEF will allow you the ability to have multiple seats at different heights, or something that I'm considering personally, and this is just a personal thing. When I'm looking to move into a new home, I'm considering doing in-wall speakers for the living room, and I really struggle with what would I get. I don't know that I'm going to get in walls, but I struggle with what would I get regardless. And the thing that I like about the KEF is the living room is in a big open floor plan with the kitchen area. So if I'm walking around the house or if I'm in the kitchen and I'm maybe making supper, which I don't know how to cook, but we're dreaming, right? Let's just dream. Then having that vertical consistency matters to me because if I'm sitting down and then I stand up, well, that's a few feet difference. That's a lot of difference when you're moving around the room. And that's one reason why I like the concentric designs. The other reason that I like them is just anecdotally, they seem like they have a deeper sound stage, but that's sighted listening. If it was blind listening, I don't know that I would say the same thing, but maybe just take that for what it's worth. So that's why I would lean toward the KEF, but the dynamic capability of the Revel would certainly intrigue me. So it's a tough call. And if you can, I would recommend trying both of them if there's any way possible because they're so different. Any negatives to taking a line signal from headphone port on my DAC because I only have one pair RCA and pass through on the amp sounds bad. No, as long as the headphone port is all right. I mean, I think we're this far along with electronics now that the headphone out should probably do okay if you take the line signal from that. The main thing is you just don't want it to be noisy. Hi, Aaron. A decent pair of two-way bookshelf speakers like JBL 708P with two good subwoofers like SVS PB16 versus three-way speakers like JBL 4367, Genelec 8361. I would go personally. I would go with the JBL 4367s because I've heard the 708Ps and I've heard the 4367s. I like I like the idea of having a passive speaker personally. I mean, powered speakers certainly have their use, and I've used them, and there's plenty of great ones. But personally, I like the idea of being able to play around with amplifiers and just not because I necessarily think that they sound different or better, but if it's something I'm going to be looking at, I want something that looks cool, and I may get tired of staring at the same old amplifier for a while, so I may want to buy something else. I know me well enough to know that I get a little bit stir crazy now and again. So my personal preference on that would be the JBL 4367, and they sound fantastic. So, $5 super chat from Hikaru Swift. How would you rate the Monoprice Encore speakers at a scale from 1 to 10? Also, does you like the T6 better than the B6? Without going back through my review, I think I like the B6 more. Um, Mainly just because for some reason, I thought that I expected more bass out of the T6, and I may not have gotten as much as I expected. And I'm not saying that the T6 has less than the B6, but I'm just saying when you look at something visually, how would I rate them on a scale of 1 to 10? Well, without EQ, maybe like a 6, you know, with equalization, because if I recall correctly, they do take well to equalization, then they're extremely good value and you can clean them up pretty easily. Let me see. Let me go back and look at my data here. This is why I have data, because then it can help me remember. Encore B6 T6. Let's look. Here's the B6. I'm just gonna go down here. They look nice, don't they? All right, what's the directivity? Ooh, there's a little bit of a difference, a dip right there. What's that from? Is that diffraction? Maybe not so much. Is it a vertical? If it's vertical, I'm not too bothered by it. Well, maybe 2. All right, go down here. That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a mix of vertical and horizontal. Let's go check out the T7 real fast. T7 directivity looks very similar, actually. Yeah, both of them, the directivity looks very similar. The T6, sorry. This is what I think I was having the issue with the T6 is it's kind of peaky right in that 100 hertz area, and they don't really get that low. The B6 has better extension, so that is what I remembered. Um, for their price with equalization, I think they're a good speaker, but without equalization, maybe look around. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that for their price that I would recommend, but I would maybe spend a little bit of time looking around. I know Joe and Tail really likes the monoprice Encores with DSP. So if you can do that, then I would recommend going that route. $2 super chat. Any higher end horns you like besides Klipsch? I don't know if you're serious or not. I hate to laugh because not all Klipsch speakers have sounded bad to me, but honestly, the majority of them I just have not liked. The JBL horns sound good to me. Danley stuff sounds incredible. Um, Gosh, what else have I heard? Trying to think. I probably reviewed like 200 speakers at this point, and it's hard for me to recall everything that I've reviewed. Yeah, I'm going to go with JBL right now because that's the only thing that I can really recall, and I've generally liked them all. Clip speakers to me, it's not their horns that I don't like; it's just their overall frequency response. Just it isn't my cup of tea. He should get Tecton Towers, 96 decibels. I've actually tried to review some of those. I reached out to them a couple years ago or a year ago, year and a half ago. It was right before 4th of July last year, so 2022. And they said, let's get through the 4th of July because it was just coming up. And I said, cool, I'll follow up. So I followed up and I didn't get a reply. And I followed up and I didn't get a reply. And I think I followed up again this year and still didn't get a reply. So Yeah, I don't think they have any interest in sending any to me. Maybe one day somebody will, though. Capra Hi-Fi, I love these style videos, even with a lot of opinions and preferences discussed. I appreciate that. You know, it's I'll be honest with you, it's kind of weird just talking to a camera with nobody else around, but it's fun, you know, maybe just kind of get to share some different ideas and things like that. What's up, Joe and Tail? I just mentioned you. The Fortes or Cornwalls would handle the Tectons. I wouldn't for myself. Maybe a Zoo Audio. Some of their stuff is really good, and the finish holds up better than the Tectons. Okay. I heard the Fortes. The Fortes actually weren't that bad to me. The Heresy 4s, though, were the ones that I was really disappointed. There's way too many cabinet resonances in that speaker that are that shouldn't be there for a speaker at its cost. And it's not one of those cases where trying to think of the manufacturer that starts with an H. Is it Harbinger? Harbith. Yeah, Harbith. Where they're known for letting their cabinets resonate, and they say that that's part of their signature sound. That particular Klipsch Heresy 4, they don't advertise that. It's just a resonant cabinet, and if they just fixed that, if they just braced it well or put more lining in it or something, that would have gone a long way to me enjoying the speaker more. Hey, Aaron, are you going to review the NUMI BS5P ARC? They updated the speakers. Now they have a sub out and HDMI ARC. Well, dadgummit. I might actually reach out to them then. NUMI normally will be willing to send me stuff and let me review it. So I might actually reach out to them if I remember to do that. I know Kefs are nice, but I don't really like how they look. I get it too. You know, honestly, their looks on their tower speakers, when I see a tower speaker, I want to feel like that tower speaker is about to beat me up and take my lunch money. Slim tower speakers to me just visually they don't do it for me, but the Kef blades, those things look awesome. I mean, I would actually love to own some of those. At Capra Hi-Fi, notice how he ignored your question. Okay. Jukebox Alley, he ignored my question also. I noticed that. Guys, I can't keep up. I mean, there's a ton of these in here. Just buy what you like. Who cares? I don't like Klipsch either. My directivity. Let's see here. Oh, directivity has no correlation with sound quality. That's a myth. Well, that's just not true. And if you don't believe me, there's plenty of research that shows it. So we can just make blanket statements. I can't personally endorse Tecton, but I really like their design. I hope you can in the future. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I can't lie. I already have kind of preconceived notions about it, but you know, we'll see. I agree with that. I'm not a Heresy fan. Forte in a medium room, very nice. Cornwall 2 for me in a larger room. Okay, let me see here. I mean, I've got so many on here that I make sure I didn't skip anybody's super chat. Yes, because look, man, if you're kicking over $5, I'm definitely going to take the time to answer your question, and it shows up, so it's super easy to tell when they're there. But it doesn't mean that I don't try to answer other questions when I can. Let's see here. I'll start back from the top. Okay. Any reason you can't mix with hi-fi speakers, especially the well-rated flat ones? No, why? No, there's no reason whatsoever that you cannot mix with hi-fi speakers. None. And in fact, there's a lot of hi-fi speakers that do better than the pro audio speakers. So you just have to add an amp to it. That's additional cost. But path not found. Trying to decide between the Kali 8-inch versus 6-inch powered Indiana Montana monitors in a medium-sized living room. I know you reviewed them smaller monitors, wondering about the sound levels with movies. You know, I don't know about those Indiana monitors. Are those the new ones? Did you? Let me look this up here. No. Oh, maybe that's a typo. I'm not really sure, but the 8-inch LP6 V2, LP8 V2, I think, are both good monitors. But if you can afford it, then the ones that I like are the IN8s. Those things are just phenomenal. And I like that the cool thing about those is they can be flipped over on their side and you don't really have to worry about horizontal dispersion because they have that concentric driver. Let's see here. Um, Man, we've got to get a Sendo to send you their 50-inch subwoofer, to help with all your back problems and stuff. Of course, yeah. Come on, just send it on out. What do I think about mode compensator that uses two microphones at 2 inch and 4 inch from the point source to remove room interaction up to 1 kilohertz? It uses the principle of SPL being halved over the distance while the room mode should be the same at both points. Maybe I don't follow. I mean, depending on the speaker, the sound can vary at different distances above 1 kilohertz, especially if the off axis behavior does not align well, does not, what's what I'm looking for here? If it doesn't have smooth directivity, then it's really more problematic. But I'm not familiar with that mode compensator. I'll have to look into that. That's interesting. Jeff Adair, have you run into the Mooseway brand? Very impressed. Mooseway brand. Let's see. No, I have not actually. Those look interesting. I wonder who makes them. Yeah, I'm not familiar with those though. How can cheap crossover parts hold a speaker back? Smearing, time domain. Do you find Valiant audiophile parts like Clarity, Caps, or Mundorf? Okay, so as far as like smearing and time domain, I don't really get into that. I don't really think that's an issue. Distortion, there's actually been measurable differences in different components. I mean, if you look at iron core versus air core inductors, I've seen measurement differences. And KEF actually has a white paper for one of their speakers. I can't remember which one it is, where they actually talk about higher end crossovers and they show components and they show measurements and distortion, comparing, I don't know if you would call them budget or like more budget versus what they call better. This stuff is relative, but they do actually show a difference. And I have seen measurements that indicate that distortion is a factor. Saturation, I know, is another thing that can become problematic. And I wonder if that rears its head in terms of like compression, linearity, those kind of aspects, but I don't know. But time and smearing, to me, I don't, and this is just an opinion, 100% just an opinion. I don't really think that that's the issue. I think most importantly is the tolerances of these parts are usually better the more money you pay. So it's not necessarily that they're higher end, it's just that they're higher tolerances. So if you say you want a 33 microfarad cap, some of these are going to be plus or minus 10%. Well, that can alter your crossover point enough to where it really changes the sound of the speaker. But if they're within 1%, then you're going to pay more, but your left and right speakers are most likely going to match really well. And that to me is the main area where it would matter. Is there any disadvantage to using speakers like QSC or JBL professional ones as LCR? No, not at all. I use JBL Pro. Heard they would be brighter than conventional speakers if I'm not listening at reference in a 30 feet room. Well, so more than likely, let's just say that they are brighter. You've got EQ. And QSC and JBL make great designs where they have really good directivity. So just take your EQ and drop that brightness down. Not a problem. Having said that, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where maybe older horn designs back in the day were poorer, where they just didn't sound as good. Now that's not so much the case, especially in that 2 kilohertz region where it's a little bit more shouty. The one thing that could be problematic is the directivity. So if a speaker has really good flat directivity in the high frequency, then that can sound brighter because the off axis radiation is very, very similar in not just shape, but level to the on axis. So instead of getting a drooping down response, because maybe the off axis generally it's going to start falling off more in level, in the case of a constant directivity horn, where it's flat directivity, not controlled, but constant flat directivity, then that means that the reflections that are bounced off the side wall are going to be very close in level to the original sound. And in a way, pardon this crude explanation, but they kind of just start stacking up. All this SPL and the reflections just start stacking up. And in the room, what you wind up with is more of a flat top end. We don't want flat response in a room. And I know that there are other reviewers who don't understand that, but don't let them fool you. You don't want flat response in a room. And I've got a video on that. If you search for it, I made it like maybe 3 months ago. And I explain why that is. And I talk about boundary reinforcement for the low frequency and how higher frequencies become more directional. And there are some cases where you might have a flat response, but really that's going to be from an omnidirectional speaker. If it's a monopole type design, then it's going to be more forward radiating. And at the higher frequencies, that higher frequency in is going to start drooping down a little bit compared to the mid and the lower bass area. So I hope that makes sense. I really kind of got to get going. I think maybe you guys can tell my eyes are getting red because I'm super tired. Let me make sure that I didn't miss any super chats. I don't want to leave anybody hanging there for sure. Let's see here. Oh, okay. $5 super chat from Technology 4617. Thank you again. Any theories as to why cardioid speakers for hi-fi monitoring are largely relegated to the ultra high end of the market as opposed to being mainstream? Just my opinion is probably cost. There are more affordable options coming out now, but from what I've seen in the past few years, and I'm not an expert on cardioid speakers, so I'm only talking about what I've experienced personally. But what I've seen is that generally speaking, cardioid designs are more expensive. And I think like the cheapest one that I'm aware of that I reviewed somewhat recently was about 5,000 for the pair. Now I do have another company that's actually sending me some. They're from Romania. And honestly, I don't even recall the name of the brand now, but they reached out and asked if I would be interested in reviewing their speaker. I went and looked at their website and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. So I'm gonna give that one a shot. But in my opinion, my answer would just be that it's probably cost. And it could also be size. You know, if you really want to get down low because you don't have that extra boundary reinforcement from a typical monopole speaker, then it might be a little bit harder to get down low. However, you are putting them closer to the wall. So there's that. Something like the Dutch and Dutch 8C, though, bucks that trend because it does have two dedicated subwoofers on the back. And so it also depends on how low are you talking about in terms of cardioid. But again, in my experience, I think it probably is going to be related to cost. Aaron, do you have the JBL HDI 3800 that you reviewed? I do not. It was a good speaker. The only issue that I had was that the soundstage split between the bottom and the highs, or the mids and the highs. And there you can actually see there's kind of like a phase discrepancy going on there, probably in the crossover. And to me, that what happened was vocals were split. I could actually like point, okay, there's the lower and mid-range vocal, and then up here is the higher frequency. Most people are probably not going to notice that. That's like a car audio thing because in car audio, you have speakers in the doors and you have tweeters up at the top. And the thing that you're listening for is how well did this person tune their system to where it sounds like one cohesive image coming from up top rather than hearing the mid bass in the door and hearing the mid range at the top. So my experience for that led me to notice that issue in that particular JBL speaker. But again, I don't think most people are probably going to notice it. 1999 super chat from Joshua Burkett. Appreciate that, brother. Have you heard GR Research XLS Encore or know of them? Thoughts on DIY performance? I've definitely heard of them. And Danny emailed me. I emailed him back. And I'm hoping maybe I can get some GR Research speakers to review because so many of you people are asking me about it. But I am overwhelmed with the amount of speakers that I have that I'm waiting. So at some point, I will give him a call, and hopefully, he and I can work something out where he'll just loan me some stuff, let me do my thing. I'll send him back, and that'll be that. Because I personally am really interested, and I'm also really interested in his Brute. Is it Brute? There's a Brutus as well. The Brute is the one that I'm interested in because that's pretty cool. It looks similar. Maybe the Brutus as well. They both look pretty dang cool. Anyway, we'll see. Hopefully. Um, Apple iPod Jack Encore is a killer bookshelf. Okay. I believe Danny also sells it. Next Studios finished. Okay. Karam, 499 super chat. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Any plans to review the Klipsch RP subwoofers as well as RBH speakers? Also, can you mention the equipment used for listening impressions? All right. So, listening impressions, I use a Macintosh MC 462, and I also amplifier, and I also use like an old Denon because when I do these reviews, what I want to do is I kind of want to cover my bases. I don't want anybody to say, well, you're using a crappy amplifier. Yeah, well, no. That Macintosh is the furthest thing from a crappy amplifier, and it's got power for days. But on the flip side, I also want to use an AVR because I want to be able to say, yeah, this speaker can probably be powered by an AVR without issue. So that's what I use for the power aspect of it. Klipsch RP subwoofers and RB8 speakers, a no on both of those, but it's not because I'm against it. It's just because it's not even something I've even thought of, to be honest with you. I think I'm going to take a break from subwoofers. I'm going to have to for a little while because it's getting cold outside. And if you test subwoofers in the cold, it changes the compliance of the subwoofer, and then it's really not fair. It basically makes the roll off sooner. They don't get as low. And if I compare a subwoofer that I test in the summer to a subwoofer I test in the winter, that's not fair. So I won't do it for that. RB8 speakers, maybe. I don't know. But again, no particular reason why. I just not currently planned. Let's see here. A lot of people arguing about stuff. That's funny. Good morning, Aaron. At least from where I sit on the globe, why do so-called audiophiles either swear by or swear against high-passing speakers with a subwoofer in stereo? Man, I don't know. I think one reason why is that if you don't know how to set them up properly, then subwoofers can actually make things sound worse. Subwoofers also tend to light up room modes more because if there's not a lot of lower frequency coming out of your bookshelf or your tower speaker, then those room modes aren't being really hit. But if you've got a subwoofer, then those room modes are being hit. And if you don't have equalization to tame those at the least, then it's going to sound bad. So I think that's why a lot of people are against subwoofers, is because it's just not properly set up. If you set it up well, it sounds fantastic. This is cool. Jack, I have an audio question I'll make you up in a sec, but I wanted to let you know you're regularly in my thoughts and prayers regarding the unexpected life changes you recently experienced. I appreciate that a lot. And I will say that things are going really well. And I'll just leave it at that. High res audio Costa. Car audio tuning is easy. Yeah, for you it is. For your big old paddy wagon van. Oh, my heart goes out to you, and I'm going through a similar situation with a pending divorce and my two children outdoor. Hang in there, dude. I think the best advice I can give anybody who's going through that, and I'm sure the people in the chat will probably back me up, is it gets better, dude. You just got to keep waking up and putting one foot in front of the other. I was told that the quickest way out of hell is directly through the fire. And that's kind of what it takes. Take up walking, man. You don't have to go to the gym. Just get out and walk. That's what I did. I couldn't tell you how many hours a day that I would just walk, talking to myself in the freezing cold of winter. You know, do what you got to do, but getting out will be a big help. $2 super chat. Have you used Smith Realizer with headphones? Man, I have not, and I wish I had a better answer for you, but I have not. I don't really listen to headphones unless I'm sitting at my desk trying to play around with some stuff or just not trying to make any external noise. But I just don't really like headphones. It's not really my thing. I like loudspeakers more. You didn't tell me what you would rate the B6 with DSP on a scale of 1 to 10, only the B6 without. Okay. The B6 on a scale of 1 to 10 with DSP, let's give it an 8. This is kind of subjective, right? Let's give it an 8. I think you can do pretty well. The dips that are there in the directivity, they're somewhat influenced by horizontal. They're also influenced by vertical. Some of that's diffraction, and so it doesn't look great. But for the most part, you can kind of finesse the peakings that are going on in there to a more linear response. And at their price, they're a good value. But without equalization, it's a little bit harder of a sell for me. But they're still so cheap. It's like, well, you got to start somewhere. That's the thing about this hobby, is that you can't necessarily start with $1,000 speakers that sound great. If some of you watched my video recently, I started off with two 10-inch Rockford Fosgate subwoofers, and then it just ballooned out, and here I am. So you got to start somewhere. So get started. If you're looking at those, go ahead, dude. Get you equalization, rock them. And if you don't have equalization, rock them anyway. play around with them, play around with positioning and aiming to get the best response for you in your seated position or positions if it's multiple seats. And just enjoy the hobby, man. That's what it's about. $10 super chat from Jack Hayes. Thank you. Thank you. Stay strong, man. Now, how did I know? Best advice for you divorce guys: stay single and focus on you. It works. Yeah, look, everybody's got their own reasons for doing whatever they do. I will just tell you right now that I would rather share my life with somebody I enjoy being with than be alone. But that doesn't mean that everybody else has to subscribe to that. And ultimately, you've got to do what makes you. You've got to do what makes you happy. And I can just tell you all now that I appreciate a lot of the feedback that I've gotten in the last year and the support, and it really did help me. Truly, I considered actually doing a follow-up video about like post-divorce, but I thought, I think that if I don't know how to explain it. I've got a kid who might watch this channel, and I've really got to be careful of what I say. And I think the best advice I can give you is just stay active when you're going through it, and wake up every day. And man, find a therapist. If you don't have friends you can talk to, find a therapist. I'm lucky that I've got a lot of friends who were willing to just let me rattle off on their ear for a little while and talk. And then I actually went to 2 different therapists before I settled on one that I really enjoy. And it's been helpful. So find friends, therapist, get active again. You don't have to go to the gym and get buff, but just do something that makes you feel good about you. And that makes the days easier to get through. That's just my opinion. Um, $1.99 super chat from Karam. What's your day job? So my degree is aerospace engineering. I'm currently an analyst. And that's all I can say, honestly. If I could tell you, I would, but I can't. So some of these comments are really good. You know what? I appreciate you all. I'm actually stayed on here longer than I really planned to. I do need to get to bed though, because I'm exhausted. But I really appreciate you all joining me, and this was fun. And hopefully, I will see you all again in 2 weeks. Stay tuned for some cool speaker reviews. I've got some of the Aperion stuff that will hit my site soon. Not not necessarily those being the cool ones, but the Sonus Faber Lumina 2s. Hopefully, the MoFi Source Point 8s will be sent to me. I've got a couple ELAC speakers that I've asked for on loan, and the Cardioid Pro monitors that I mentioned earlier. And it seems like there's a couple other things I'm forgetting, but stuff I'm excited about, and I think that you all will be too. And with all of that said, I do appreciate it. Like I said, I hope you have a good night or a good rest of the day. For those of you who are on the other side of the world, I will talk to you all later. Take care. Peace.